I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, um, assuming you aren't driving or operating heavy machinery.
Yeah, please keep your eyes open if you're driving.
Right. But if you can, picture this. You are in a conference room, the air is stale, the coffee is, well, it's cold by now,
Definitely cold.
and you have just spent like 3 hours brainstorming the next big thing for your company, and the whiteboard is just an absolute war zone.
Oh, I know that exact
It's
whiteboard.
covered in hundreds of sticky notes, neon yellow, pink, blue, lines drawn everywhere, connecting ideas that made total sense an hour ago.
Right, it looks like the work of a mad genius. Or maybe just a complete mess.
Exactly. And then comes the dreaded part. The meeting ends, people start packing up their bags, and someone takes a blurry, glare-filled photo of that whiteboard with their phone.
They email it to the team and say something like, "Great session, everyone. Let's circle back next week."
And we all know exactly what happens next. That energy, it completely evaporates.
The context is just lost.
Totally lost. The photo dies in an inbox, and by next week, nobody remembers what that red circle around the word synergy actually meant.
Yeah.
It is a graveyard for good ideas.
It's where innovation goes to die, because that gap between the physical energy of the room and the digital reality of our work, that's usually where projects just fall apart.
Yeah. But today, we're talking about the company that killed that blurry photo.
Mm.
We are talking about the platform that took that chaotic physical mess and turned it into a digital canvas that is now used by, get this, 99% of the Fortune 100. We're doing a deep dive into Miro.
But we need to be really clear right off the bat here. This is not a product review.
No.
We aren't here to sell software. We are looking at a really fascinating conversation between Miro's founder and CEO, Andre Kusid, and Eric Roth from McKinsey. And what we're extracting from the source material is basically a masterclass in decision making.
Right. This is about strategy. It's about how you build something massive from absolutely nothing.
It is. It's about what Kusid calls day one thinking. It's about the sheer guts to turn down millions of dollars when you're broke. And it's about a very specific contrarian view on how artificial intelligence should actually work in a team setting.
It really is a wild journey. I mean, we're going to unpack how a simple $10 domain name evolved into what they're now calling an AI innovation workspace with over 100 million users. So let's rewind the clock. We're going back about 14 years.
Right, to the early 2010s,
Right.
which was a completely different era in tech.
Yeah, so set the scene for us. Andre Kusid is running a creative agency. He has clients who are remote, and he just hits a wall.
Yeah.
He needs a way to brainstorm with them visually, but the tools just, they aren't there.
They were completely fragmented. That's really the key word here. You had tools for flowcharts, you had tools for mind maps, tools for drawing, but they were all siloed. If you wanted to move from brainstorming to planning, you had to completely switch applications. And his frustration was that the workflow itself was broken. He was spending more time managing the tools than actually doing the work.
So his vision wasn't just, I want to draw on a screen.
No, not at all. He wanted a universal canvas, a single infinite plane where you could do the discovery, the planning, and the delivery all without ever switching tabs. He wanted to replicate that physical war room we just talked about, but in the browser, accessible from anywhere.
So he goes and buys a domain name. And get this, he buys it for $10, and the original name was Real Time Board.
Which is, it's incredibly literal.
It does exactly what it says on the tin,
Hmm.
but he made a promise to himself. He said, if this company actually takes off, I am going to rename it. And true to his word, in 2019, they rebrand to Miro.
And the inspiration there is actually quite meaningful. It's named after the Spanish artist Joan Miro.
Which is interesting. Why him specifically? Like, why not Picasso or Dali?
Because of the style. Kusid wanted users to feel like artists, not data entry clerks. When you look at a Joan Miro painting, you see these distinct abstract shapes, these really bold colors. It's highly expressive.
I see.
Kusid wanted that exact same feeling when you zoom out on a digital board. He wanted you to feel that you aren't just processing information, you're creating something unique. He was trying to inject genuine creativity into the incredibly boring world of enterprise software.
I really love that connection. But I want to shift gears to the business strategy for a second, because this is where the story gets super counterintuitive. In the early days, they are a young startup, they are hungry for users, but they made a design choice that honestly sounds like business suicide. They absolutely refuse to sell the product to individuals.
Yeah, this is the anti-single player bet, and honestly, it is one of the bravest moves I've seen in software history.
Walk me through this. So if I wanted to buy a license back then, I couldn't just buy one for myself.
No. The minimum package was 5 seats. You literally could not buy a solo subscription. If you tried to give them your credit card for just yourself, they wouldn't take your money.
That just seems crazy to me.
Hmm.
You are actively adding friction. You are telling a potential customer, no, I don't want your money unless you go find 4 friends. Why on earth would a starving startup do that?
Because QSeed understood the trap of single-player mode. If people use the tool alone, what is it really? It's just Microsoft Paint in a browser.
Right.
It's a sketching pad. The value is incredibly low, and the stickiness, meaning how likely you are to stay subscribed, is low. You might use it once and completely forget about it.
But if you force them to buy 5,
Then you are engineering collaboration from the exact point of sale. You are literally forcing the user to bring their team into the room. So suddenly, the value proposition isn't I can draw, it's we can think together.
wow.
It was a forcing function. They sacrificed short-term revenue from individual users to basically force a network effect.
So every customer essentially becomes an internal champion who have to onboard 4 other people just to justify what they just spent.
Exactly. It's a classic example of product-led growth, but with a very aggressive barrier to entry. They bet that the value of the network was greater than the value of the individual user.
That takes a lot of guts, but arguably not as much guts as the next story, because this one actually made my jaw drop when I read the interview. So picture this. Miro is still a really small company. They're doing about $1 million in annual revenue. They're fully in survival mode.
Right. Every single dollar counts at that stage. You are looking at your cash runway constantly.
And along comes a big customer. We don't actually know who it was from the source, but a massive enterprise comes knocking and offers them a check for $2 million.
Let's just pause on that for a second. That is double their entire annual revenue in one single check. That is life-changing money for a startup.
It is a company making amount of money. But there was a catch. The customer wanted an on-premise solution.
We should probably define that for the listeners who might not be deep in enterprise tech.
Good call. So what does on-premise actually mean in this context?
So Miro is a SaaS product, software as a service. It lives in the cloud. You access it via a website. The data lives on Miro's servers. On-premise means the customer wants to take the software code and physically install it on their own local servers behind their own corporate firewalls, usually for security reasons.
So they want to completely own and control their own private instance of the software. Why is that such a big problem?
Because it creates what we call a fork in the road. If QSeed says yes to this, suddenly his engineering team is splitting their focus. Half the team is building the cloud product for everybody else, and the other half is maintaining this very specific custom version for one giant client.
Ah, it's the consulting trap.
Precisely. You stop building a product and you start building a service for one guy. You become a custom development shop. And QSeed knew that the future was SaaS. He knew the whole market was moving to the cloud. He knew that if he took that money, he would drastically slow down his innovation for everyone else just to please this one whale.
So he just said no.
He turned down a check twice the size of his company because he didn't want the distraction. He prioritized the long-term vision over the immediate cash injection.
That is the absolute definition of discipline. Because it's easy to have a vision when things are going great. It's incredibly hard to have a vision when someone is waving $2 million in your face and you're just trying to make payroll.
And that discipline really paid off. Because if you fast forward to 2020, the world changed overnight.
The pandemic.
And for a tool entirely built for remote collaboration, this was the moment.
The numbers here are just staggering. When COVID hit, Miro had about 200 employees and 5 million users. 18 months later, they had 1,800 employees and 50 million users.
That is hypergrowth in its absolute most extreme form. That's scaling at a speed that usually breaks companies. Most organizations would just implode under that kind of pressure.
And there is a nuance here that QSeed brings up in the interview that I found super honest. You might assume that because Miro is a remote collaboration tool, their own internal company culture was perfectly set up for remote work.
Oh, I think everyone assumed that. You think, oh, they build the digital whiteboard. They must be the masters of distributed work.
But they weren't. QSeed completely admits they were actually a very office-centric culture.
They were co-located. They relied on being in the same room just like everybody else did. So when the lockdowns happened, they had to scramble too.
So what was the biggest friction point for them internally?
It was the shift from implicit to explicit communication. Because in an office, you have osmosis. You overhear things, you see people in the hall. When you go remote, suddenly everything has to be documented. Processes have to be explicit. Kusid says that if he could do it all over again, he would have built processes from day one that sustained any setup, remote, hybrid, or in-person.
Instead of just reacting to the emergency.
Right. He calls it building for resilience rather than building for the office. If you build your company so it works remotely from the start, then the physical office just becomes a perk. It's not a crutch.
That's a huge lesson for any leader listening. Don't build your culture around the physical building. Build it around the work itself.
Exactly. And the other major thing the pandemic did was wake up the tech giants. Suddenly, Microsoft, Google, Apple, everyone realized that visual collaboration is actually mission critical.
Yeah, the freeform app on Apple, Microsoft Loop. The competition heated up incredibly fast.
Which pushed Miro to evolve yet again. They couldn't just be the sticky note guys anymore. That entire feature set was becoming commoditized. Because really, anyone can build a digital sticky note.
So how do they defend their territory against companies that size?
By moving up the value chain. Kusid explains that they move from just visual tools to handling structured data. They realized that to actually own the whole innovation cycle, they needed to handle documents, tables, complex workflows. They had to become an end-to-end suite.
And speaking of that workflow, Kusid lays out a framework that I think is really helpful for anyone trying to launch a product or manage a project. He calls it Discover, Define, Deliver.
Right, and his main observation is that the business world is completely obsessed with the deliver part. We have Jira, we have Asana, we have Gantt charts. We are very, very good at tracking the execution of a task. We know how to hit a deadline.
But the discover and define parts.
Total black box. It is a mess of email threads, Slack messages, and hallway conversations. There is no system of record for why we are actually doing the project. Kusid argues that this is where projects actually fail. Not in the delivery, but because the discovery phase was so chaotic, we end up executing the wrong plan perfectly.
But isn't discovery inherently messy? I mean, it's brainstorming. You can't put a Gantt chart on a brainstorming session.
It is messy, but Kusin talks about the blank canvas fear. You know that feeling when you open a new document and you just stare at the blinking cursor?
The white screen of death
Yeah.
is totally paralyzing.
Exactly. So they introduced templates. They didn't just give you a blank whiteboard. They gave you a structure for the chaos. Like, here is a template for a retrospective. Here is a template for a user journey map. It's a simple nudge, but it gets people moving. It lowers the cognitive load of just starting.
There's another feature he mentioned that I absolutely love. It's such a small detail, but it speaks volumes about how they think about human psychology and group dynamics. It's the spinner wheel.
Ah, yes. The introvert's best friend.
We have all been in those digital meetings where a question gets asked, and there is that awful, awkward silence. Nobody knows whose turn it is. Or worse, the exact same two loud people dominate the entire conversation.
Right. The loudest voice wins, not necessarily the best idea. This is the HIPPO problem. The highest paid person's opinion usually dominates the room.
So Miro built a widget. You click a button, a digital wheel spins on everyone's screen, and it randomly selects who speaks next.
It sounds like a game. It sounds almost trivial, but think about what it actually does. It completely removes the social pressure. It removes the bias of hierarchy. The wheel doesn't care if you're the intern or the CEO.
It's digital engineering of social behavior.
Precisely. Kusid's point is that in a digital-first world, you lose the subtle body language cues, the leaning forward, the eye contact. You actually have to engineer those interactions back into the software to ensure psychological safety.
And now they're trying to engineer the next massive shift, the pivot to AI. But I want to pause here for a second because every single company says they are pivoting to AI. It is the buzzword of the century. Everyone is just slapping an AI sticker on their homepage.
It is. But Kusid makes a distinction that I think is actually highly valid. He talks about single-player AI versus multiplayer AI.
Break that down for us. What is single-player AI?
That's what most of us are doing right now. You open ChatGPT or Claude, you type a prompt, the bot answers you. It is a strictly private conversation between you and the intelligence.
Right, it's individual productivity. It makes me faster.
Exactly. But Miro is betting that the real value unlocks when AI becomes a team member. They want AI to operate in that shared space where everyone is looking at the exact same thing simultaneously.
So not just a chatbot sitting in a sidebar.
No. Imagine that messy whiteboard we talked about at the very beginning. You finish your workshop. You have 500 sticky notes. In the old world, some poor project manager has to spend 3 days typing them up, grouping them, synthesizing themes, and writing a report.
And by the time they send that report, a week has passed and the team has completely moved on.
Right. Kusid claims their AI can take that visual mess, the spatial data, the text, the groupings, and synthesize it into insights, action items, and next steps in just 2 hours.
That is speed to value. You are condensing weeks of tedious work into hours. But there's a controversial point here that Kusid raises about AI, and I kind of want to challenge this a bit.
You're talking about the hallucination point.
Yes, because we usually talk about AI hallucinations when the AI just makes stuff up. It's a terrible problem.
Yeah.
It's a bug that needs to be crushed.
Mm-hmm.
You do not want your AI banking assistant inventing fake transactions. That's a massive lawsuit waiting to happen.
Correct. In a deterministic world, like accounting or coding, hallucination is a complete failure. But Kusid argues that in the discovery phase of innovation, hallucination is actually a feature.
A feature. He actively wants the AI to lie to us. That sounds genuinely dangerous.
Well, lie implies malice. He wants it to explore the edges.
Ow.
Think about lateral thinking. When you are brainstorming, you often throw out crazy, seemingly impossible ideas just to spark a new connection.
Right, the whole there are no bad ideas rule.
Exactly. If you have an AI that is strictly factual and entirely logical, it will only give you the average expected answers. It will give you the safe bet every time. But if you increase the temperature of the model, make it hallucinate a bit, it might connect dot A to dot Z in a way a human wouldn't logically expect.
So it essentially creates creative friction.
It acts as a provocateur. If the AI suggests a concept that doesn't actually exist, that might trigger a real idea in your head that could exist. It helps you break out of your standard patterns of thinking.
That is a fascinating nuance. So for the deliver phase, the execution, you want absolutely zero hallucinations. But for the discover phase, you actually want a little bit of craziness.
It's all about context. And that is exactly where Miro is trying to position itself, understanding the specific mode of work you are in at any given moment.
So we have the product evolution, we have this massive AI pivot. But I want to close on the leadership philosophy that drives all of this behind the scenes. Because Kusid has this overarching concept of day one thinking.
Yes, this is the philosophy that allows them to pivot so fast.
Yeah.
The core question he constantly asks his team is, if I started building this product today with the technology available today, what would it look like?
Which, to be honest, sounds like a pretty standard startup mantra, like stay hungry, right?
It sounds like it, but the practical implication is much harder to swallow. It implies that you do not care about what you built 5 years ago. It means completely ignoring the sunk cost fallacy.
Can you give an example of what that actually looks like in practice?
Sure. Take their user interface toolbar. They have spent 10 years perfecting the UI for their standard toolbar, millions of dollars of R&D. But now they're rolling out this new AI canvas. Kusid says if the AI interface works better, they will immediately kill the old toolbar.
Wait, they would just delete 10 years of work?
In a heartbeat. If it doesn't fit the day one vision, it is legacy garbage. It doesn't matter how much you loved it yesterday or how much you spent on it.
That is absolutely ruthless.
It's survival. It is the only way to avoid becoming a legacy software company that just gets disrupted by the next kid in a garage. You have to be willing to cannibalize your own product before someone else does it for you.
There's one other ritual he mentioned that I think our listeners can apply immediately, regardless of whether they run a software company or a local bakery. It's the concept of the bad version.
Oh, I love this one. It's very counterintuitive to how we're all taught to behave in a corporate setting.
So Kusid actively encourages his employees to bring the bad version of an idea to the table. Don't polish it. Don't make it pretty. Just show the ugly, rough draft.
And we all know exactly why we don't naturally do this. We are afraid. We want to look competent. We want to show our boss the perfect finished slide deck with the perfect fonts and alignment.
Well, what is the actual cost of that perfectionism?
Time. The cost is speed. You spend 3 weeks polishing a deck, only to present it and realize you solved the entirely wrong problem.
And now you have wasted 3 weeks. Plus, you're emotionally attached to the solution because you spend so much time perfectly spacing the fonts.
Exactly. If you had just shared the bad version on day one, you would have gotten that directional feedback immediately. You detach your ego from the artifact.
But it's about psychological safety again, isn't it? The leader has to model this. If the CEO never shows a bad version, nobody else is going to stick their neck out.
Correct. The goal isn't to look smart. The goal is to get to the right answer faster. Innovation is inherently messy, and if you hide the mess, you are ultimately hiding the progress.
And that leads perfectly into the quote from the lightning round that I think sums up this entire deep dive. Eric Roth asks him about the biggest myth in innovation.
And Kusid says, the myth is that only a few people can innovate.
The Steve Jobs myth. The idea that you need a lone visionary in a black turtleneck to come down from the mountain and tell everyone what to do.
Right. Kusid fundamentally believes innovation is a team sport. Every single human can innovate. It's not reserved for the creatives or the design team. It's simply about creating the environment, the tools, the psychological safety, the workflows, where that natural innovation can actually come out.
It's accessible to everyone. So let's wrap this up. We've gone from a $10 domain name to a platform that is actively trying to bridge human and artificial intelligence.
And the through line here, the red thread connecting that $10 domain to this huge AI future, is the shift from individual productivity to team velocity. Whether it's the buy 5 licenses rule, the spinner wheel for introverts, or the multiplayer AI concept. Everything Miro does is explicitly designed to make the group smarter, not just the individual.
So here is my question for you, listening right now. Think about that bad version concept we just talked about. In your own work, are you holding back a project or an idea right now because it isn't polished yet? Are you quietly waiting for it to be absolutely perfect before you show it to anyone?
What would happen if you showed it to your team today, warts and all? I mean, you might look a little foolish for 5 minutes, but you might save yourself 3 weeks of wasted work.
And here's something else to mull over. What if taking that bad version and intentionally running it through an AI, not to fix it, but to ask the AI to make it even crazier, is the exact friction you need to find your actual big idea? Give it a try. Share the bad version. Thanks for diving in with us today.